So first of all, I'm going to thank Little Gretchen's Workshop as well as Tiny Keyhole Minis because they've both done ironing boards, and I'm kind of doing a combination of both of their ironing boards. However, mine's a little bit different because I'm going to be doing mine in 1/24 scale, and I'm using a tongue depressor, and I'm discarding the first one I picked because it's a little bit warped. This one's a little bit straighter. So I'm measuring the length of my ironing board to be 2¼ inches long. So, and I want to keep that rounded tip on the end. So 2¼ inches is what I'm measuring. So I've got out my miter cutters and I'm just going to cut this quickly. So now I've got the length that I want. I'm just going to grab out a pencil crayon and I'm going to draw the shape of the ironing board in so I know where to cut the excess wood off. So I'm going to be keeping it a very traditional ironing board shape. So I'm just kind of drawing the pointed end on it here, and then I will know where to cut it. So there you go. So once again, I got the miter shears out and I'm just going to be cutting those parts out that I drew on. And of course, when you cut it with the miter shears, you're not going to get a nice rounded look. You're just going to get a flat area. So it's going to require a little bit of sanding afterwards. So that's what it looks like. I'm not really pleased. I think it's a little bit too wide. So I'm actually going to take the miter shears and just trim off just a slight little bit off of each side just to kind of make it more in scale. So I'm actually quite pleased with the size of this. It kind of looks in proportion to my dollhouses. Now I'm just sanding the edges and rounding them off just to give it a nice, just a nice clean look. There you go. So it's nicely sanded and looks the proper shape. And there, I'm trying my little iron on top of it. Looks kind of cute. So now I'm doing the first set of legs and I'm going to be using a coffee stir stick. So I want it to be just slightly longer than the ironing board, the first set of legs, and I'm going to require 2 pieces exactly the same for this job. So I'm just taking the miter shears and I'm just going to cut it, and then I'll have to cut a second one the exact same size. So now I've got the second one lined up, and again I'm going to cut it so they're both identical. So now I've got the first set of legs created, and I think that that will be the perfect size. So now these legs have to be able to pivot, so which means I'm going to have to round off the edges on the part that I just cut. So I want it to be rounded at the top and also rounded at the bottom. So I've got the sandpaper out and I'm just using kind of a curved motion, and I'm just taking the squareness off of the end of each of these pieces and making it round like the other side. So there you go. So I've got one done, and then I will do the same to the other side. Now I've got the first set of legs cut out and sanded and ready to go, and they need to be mounted onto a block piece that gets mounted permanently onto the back of the ironing board. And to do that, I need to find something that's square. So I've got this square piece of dowel, and I'm just going to cut a small piece that this set of legs can get mounted to, and then it will be glued onto the back of the ironing board. Okay, so this is where I want to mount this square piece, and so I've just got to figure out what size I want it to be. So I'm marking it with my pencil crayon so I know exactly where to clip it. Now I'm clipping it with the miter shears, and this will be perfect. It'll work just fine to hold the, see how it's square in shape? So that's what's going to hold the legs together. So I've just sat it where I want it to go, and basically what's going to happen is I'm going to mount it here, and you see how it's going to be. So the little square piece will be glued to the ironing board, but then the two little legs will be able to swing on a pivot. You'll see what I mean in a second. So that's why I've got the hand drill out. These little pins that I have are called head pins, and they're used in jewelry making, and you can find them at any bead supply store. But you could use straight pins for these purposes. I'm just using what I have. So I've got these little gold head pins. So they've got a end on them just like the end on a regular straight pin. I've got the smallest bit that I own now on my hand drill, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be drilling a little hole right at the end of this coffee stir stick, and then also on the end of my little square piece, so I can mount it so that these little sticks are going to be able to swivel. Here I am using the hand drill to drill a hole right in the end of the little coffee stir stick. And it's really nice to use these coffee stir sticks because the wood is quite soft, and it's quite easy to drill through. It's not doesn't take a lot of effort to drill on these. Now I've got a hole drilled in it. I'm just pulling the head pin through it, and you can see here how it's easy enough to be able to pivot. And so I'm going to do the same with the second piece. Now I've got both sides of the leg done, and I'm just fitting the head pins in, and you can see they're perfect. So now the next step is to drill that little block that I made out of the square piece of wood. So I'm just going to drill in about 1/8 of an inch deep, just enough to be able to mount the head pin into each side of this little block of wood. I'm not sure what kind of wood this is, but it's a little bit harder or more difficult to drill a hole in it than it was through the popsicle sticks. But yes, patience, and I will endure and get it done. So you can see here I'm just drilling a nice straight hole, one in each end of this. You can see here that I've drilled a hole in each end. Now I successfully have all the pieces ready for my first set of legs. The next step, of course, is to trim the head pins so that they're going to be able to fit inside of the little block. So I've just got my wire cutters out, and you can see here I've left about 1/8 of an inch of the head pin left, so that I can use it kind of as a hinge. The rest of it, I'm not going to discard it. I might use it for something else. You never know. So there you go. So I've got the two pieces ready to go. Do you see how that's going to fit right into the little block? And then the piece will be able to swivel on the block. The next step, of course, is to mount the block with Elmer's wood glue onto the back of the ironing board. So I'm just squirting out a little bit of Elmer's wood glue, and I'm going to mount that little block right on the back. So I'm just adding the Elmer's wood glue to the little block, and then I'm going to mount it at the bottom. Right, no, not at that end, wrong end. Yes, that end. So I'm mounting the block at that end of the ironing board. So that's perfect. That's exactly where it has to be. And then I'm going to be taking, I'm going to be taking these little pins, and I'm going to be putting the wood glue on the pins, and then I'm going to be mounting them onto the block. And this is quite easy. It's going to go in quite nicely. So there you go. there's number 1. So this is the first set of legs. So, and then the second one, I've just got to get some glue on the end of that little head pin, and I'm going to glue that right inside here. You see that? How the little head pin is going to go in all the way. It's going to line it up properly. And there you go. That's the first set of legs done. So you have to do 2 sets of legs, of course, for an ironing board. So that is absolutely perfect. And I like the way that looks. I'm just going to have to move it over a little bit. It's not quite centered, but I do catch on. So now I've made the second set of legs. So the second set of legs are smaller, and they are a little bit shorter by at least 1/4 of an inch. And as you can see, I've drilled holes in all 4 legs and put a head pin right through the middle. And so now what I'm doing is I'm just doing little braces. So I'm just cutting some more coffee stir sticks and just kind of fitting them in to make the ends of the legs. So it's quite easy to do. It's not difficult at all. So I'm just kind of doing it by eye and trying to get it to fit in as best as I can. So of course, I don't measure anything. So just take a little hair off and then another little hair off until it actually fits. So there you go. So that's the end of one leg. And then I'm going to be doing the same to the original leg. So I'm just using my little clamps to dip it into the glue because it's so tiny and fiddly. It's a little bit easier to use the clamps than it is to use my fingers. So I'm just kind of propping it in there. Excuse my hand is in the way, but you'll see in a second how it looks. So that turned out perfect. And then I'm going to be doing the same thing to the first set of legs that I made. So those are the exterior legs. So once again, I'm going to cut another coffee stir stick, approximately the right size. Ooh, this time I'm getting fancy. I'm actually taking out a pencil crayon and actually sort of measuring. So yeah, I'm just going to clip this off here, and then I will do the same thing. I'm going to dip it in the glue and then fit it inside of that little area at the very bottom of the leg. I let it set up for about a half an hour, and you can see here this is how it's going to work. So I taken this idea from Tiny Keyhole Minis. She used one of these little closed pegs to be able to use as a stopper so that the ironing board will stay open, and I'm going to do the same thing. So again, I'm taking out a little bit of Elmer's wood glue, and I'm going to glue 1/2 of the little closed peg on. So I'm just putting a little bit of glue on the back of the clothes peg, and then I'm going to mount it onto the back of the ironing board. And I think this will work quite well. As you can see here, it's easy enough to fold it up and put it away, and it sets up really nicely. So that's kind of nice because you can just kind of put it against a wall or what have you, or you can use it set up. My next step is to cover the top of the ironing board with some fabric. So I got these fabric squares when I was at a thrift shop, and so I'm just going to use one of these little fabric quilting squares, and I'm just using the pencil crayon to give myself at least a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to draw all the way around the board. And now I'm just cutting it out. I've got my nice little sharp scissors, so I think that this will work just perfect. So, and it's a nice neutral kind of fabric that you would normally see on an ironing board. So I think it's a good choice of fabric for sure. Now I'm just checking the fit and it appears to be okay. So my next step is to take the tacky glue and glue this fabric onto the ironing board. So I'm just going to give it a nice light coat of glue all over the top of the ironing board, just so that it goes on there fairly securely. And yeah, I think that will work really well. And tacky glue is pretty good. I mean, it doesn't dry all clumpy, so, and it's easy enough to spread and get a nice even coat. So now I've got it spread nice and evenly. I'm just going to lay it down and press it onto the fabric. So I still think I have maybe a little bit too big of a seam allowance. So I'm just going to pick it up and trim it down just slightly, because I want to be able to fold it over, and I don't want it to be too big of an overhang. So as you can see here, I've just got my scissors and I'm just going around it just to make sure that I've got the proper seam allowance. So, and I think that this is going to look really nice when it's done. I'm quite pleased with it. So a lot of fiddling to be able to do this little piece, but it sure is sweet once it's done up. So so I'm just, as you can see, just cutting around all the way around the edge of it, just trimming it down. And then in order for it to be able to fold up really nice, I'm just going to go all the way around the edge every ½ inch or so and just kind of put a little slit in it, and it'll be much easier for me to turn it up onto the back. So as you can see here, I'm just doing about every ½ inch or so, or ½ inch or so, all the way around the outside. So, and then I'm going to open the ironing board and I'm going to glue this down. So, and once again, I'm using the tacky glue, not the wood glue. And I'm just spreading some around the edges. And then I'm going to turn the edges up, and it'll look like it's cinched on just like a regular ironing board cover. So there you go. And those little slits that I cut in it made it so much easier to be able to turn this fabric, especially around the corners. It's really difficult to do that if you don't have the slits cut in it. But as you can see, that's pretty easy to do. So I'm going to go all the way around the board and finish it just like this. I'm almost done turning that over, just adding a little bit more glue in areas where it looks like it's popping up a little bit. And just finishing this last edge here. So now I've got the edge all glued down. And looks like a real ironing board. It's kind of cute, and that turned out really nice and neat. And just like tiny keyhole minis, I'm tying a little tiny bow out of embroidery thread, just to add to the top of the ironing board, so it looks like it's a cover that has been tied on like the way it is on our normal ironing boards. So I'm just kind of making a little tiny bow, and then I'm going to trim it off, and then I'll glue it onto the back of the ironing board. I know this little bow is just such a tiny little detail, but it just adds so much realism to it. When I watched tiny keyhole minis do that, I thought, oh, that's just so cute. I just love it. So I knew that it was a little embellishment that I had to add to mine. So there you go. I'm just putting the little bow on. Now, isn't that so sweet? And really, that's so cool. I think I like that part the best. Well, there it is, my finished product. So a little 2½ inch wide ironing board. I just think that thing is so precious. And there's my little iron, which is actually a little Monopoly piece. And you can see here that's how it works. And whoops, no, it doesn't fold like that, Lisa. Sorry, you have to see. I'm trying to manhandle it. You have actually, yes, there you go. You flip it like that, and then it can store up against the wall. So it's perfect. It's a little wonky at the bottom, but oh well. It's mine, and I really like it. So I'm quite happy with the way it turned out, and it sits pretty level. So good enough. Well, thank you very much for watching today. I so appreciate it. And thank you again to Little Gretchen's Workshop and Tiny Keyhole Minis for giving me this inspiration to do this little project. I was looking online for 124 scale little ironing board, but absolutely impossible to find. So yeah, I think this one here is pretty good. It does the job. Thank you very much for watching today. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. It's free and it really does help my channel out. And please leave comments. I so enjoy reading them. And tell your friends about my channel. And have the best day ever, guys.